You are listening to the Air Raid Hour with host Judge Mathis, dog, Tilt Money, dog, presented by the fine folks over at the Cover One Sports Network, dogs. Bills Mafia, let's go!
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to not Victory Monday edition of the Air Raid Hour. You know who I am. You know who Dave is. This show is presented by the Cover One Sports Network. We're just going to get right into it today. I don't even want to do the introductions. I just want to get right in. So, Dave, the season is over. Last night, the Bills fell to the Bengals 27-10 in, quite frankly, embarrassing fashion. To me, out-schemed, outworked. It was the first time this season I felt like the Buffalo Bills did not beat themselves from start to finish. The other team just whooped the Buffalo Bills, and the Bengals dominated the Bills from start to finish. I think RJ Melville has a great comment here. It was the first comment in the chat. So remember when 13 seconds felt like the biggest gut punch ever? Somehow this is worse. Set the confidence of this fan base back and this team back about 4 years. And I feel you. I feel like this fan base is more downtrodden, more upset, more angry at what happened yesterday than they were about 13 seconds, which occurred in the same divisional round just 1 year ago. So what are your initial reactions here?
I mean, I agree with RJ. I mean, the fact of the matter is last year's game, you were in Arrowhead, you were going back and forth with the Chiefs, and you were a fluky 13 seconds away from being in the AFC Championship game. You cannot say that about anything that happened in the game yesterday. You were never really in the game. Okay, yes, you got it to, within 10 points or whatever, but like it never really felt like the Bills had any momentum or juice in that game. Maybe the most you could have said was after Josh got that touchdown and cut it to a 1-score game at that point. But to me, it was really just lackluster from start to finish. I made the comparison that I felt like it looked like the Bills were playing on ice and the Bengals were playing on grass, the way they were moving around the field. It just felt like the Bills were just completely outmanned, outcoached, out everything all day. And RJ has a good point because we've seen it just in the last 24 hours on social media and otherwise, is that like, okay, I mean, yes, no way it's worse than 13 seconds. I mean, for a concentrated amount, yes, I agree. But for the totality of the effort and the there's no way this is better than that, right? Like, yeah, I mean, Pete says, I guess I'm in the minority because I prefer the beatdown. I will say this, Pete, and this is probably the point that that others are trying to make, like Trey. There's no excuse, right? There's no what if with this one. Whereas like the 13 seconds, it was like that should have been ours, right? Like that should have been our game, and that should have been maybe our chance to win the Super Bowl because we probably could have beaten the Bengals last year. This game, there's nothing you can say, like one play or one fluky thing that happened to say, oh, we should have had it. Like, no, we shouldn't have. We never had it. We were never in it. And I think that's maybe the point that Pete and Trey are trying to make.
Yeah, and Axon Jackson comes in. I think he summarizes it best. I'm in less pain than last year's heartbreaker, but also feel less optimistic about the future because of the way that we got beaten this game. And I know we have to get into it. And I feel like the number one thing that we're going to talk about tonight, because I think it's the number one topic on social media, is the future of this coaching staff. And this is 3 straight seasons now where I personally feel like, and I know others feel like, our season has ended mostly because the Buffalo Bills, and again, the players were outplayed, but last year we were outcoached in those 13 seconds. And this year, from start to finish, Lou Anarumo and Brian Callahan and Zach Taylor absolutely ran laps around Leslie Frazier and Ken Dorsey from a schematic standpoint. So 3 straight seasons where the Buffalo Bills have sort of exited the playoffs, not just because they've been outplayed, but really because they've been outcoached. Matt Milano post-game said there was no real energy, no juice, no momentum. In my opinion, That's not just on the players. I think that coaching played a role in that. This coaching staff has, since the beginning of Sean McDermott's tenure, been very reactive as opposed to proactive.
Mm.
Oh, let's go out there and let's see what the other team does. Let's take a few punches. And then we'll go from there, as opposed to coming out and imposing your will on the opponents, because that is what the Cincinnati Bengals did. The Cincinnati Bengals didn't come out and say, oh, we're going to see what the Buffalo Bills do. The Cincinnati Bengals just came out and did what they did, and they did what they're best at. And they're like, come on, stop us. Because that's what they did to the Buffalo Bills in this football game. Mitch Moore said it post game. He confirmed it. He said on the execution versus the Bengals, we kind of dipped our toe in the water and they jumped in the pool. And I've gotten a ton of flack from angry Bills fans for saying that in no way, shape, or form has terminating Sean McDermott crossed my mind. Like, I get people's anger, I get people's frustration, but I'm not there yet in terms of replacing the head coach like a loud minority of people are on social media today. Do you think I'm wrong in that thinking that Sean McDermott needs to be replaced?
I don't think you're wrong in that thinking. I do think it's fair to question the ceiling potentially of McDermott when it comes to the playoffs, right? And there have been a lot of coaches in all four of the major sports in the U.S. and probably some in soccer too, and I'm not as familiar, but that have been excellent regular season coaches and just haven't gotten it done in the playoffs. I mean, you look at a coach like John Fox, right? A recent example, defensive minded guy, has a 9-8 playoff record under his belt, but he never won the Super Bowl and was a guy that people looked at as a really, really good coach. But I don't know that anyone ever looked at him as a guy that could maybe win it all. And John Fox had a couple of like coach of the year, type seasons as well. So, and people want to bring up Marty Schottenheimer as well. It's like probably a little premature for that. Marty Schottenheimer coached 18 playoff games. McDermott's only coached 9 so far. So look, McDermott's 4-5 in the playoffs. He's obviously taken this team out of the drought and made them a perennial playoff team. But there at some point, there is an inflection point, right? McDermott is not going to be replaced, but there will need to be an inflection point at some point during the Josh Allen era where we say, is there more out there that this team is capable of? And is there a certain coach or coaches holding the team back? Because you're not replacing Josh Allen.
Yeah.
He's the reason that you're going to win a Super Bowl if you do win one. It's too early to talk about McDermott being on the hot seat, as the comments section rightfully pointed out. We were just talking about him as a coach of the year candidate. But in big games now, 3 years in a row, we've come up short. And I know that's really bothering a lot of people. But you look at guys like Andy Reid, who took forever to win a Super Bowl. He had tons of terrible playoff losses. And it's just, I'm not there yet with McDermott. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that others on the staff can't be replaced.
Yeah, I mean, Jason Sugg comes in, and I really like this analogy. He says Doug Collins got the Bulls to the playoffs, but Phil Jackson got them the title.
Hey, listen. I put a tweet out before the show tonight. Yeah. I don't know if people have watched this, but the Shaq documentary on HBO, it's pretty good. The Los Angeles Lakers got Shaq, right? After he left the Orlando Magic. Del Harris was the head coach of the Lakers. They went to the conference finals twice and lost, and went to the conference semifinals once and lost. And they decided, we have Shaq, we're replacing Del Harris. They got Phil Jackson the next year and proceeded to win 3 titles in a row. Now, I'm not saying it's apples to apples, but it's a really good comparison.
But my point here, to counter sort of what that analogy is Phil Jackson out there?
That's what I said. I said I don't think he is. I don't think he is.
Like the name that everyone keeps bringing up is, well, let's fire Sean McDermott and go get Sean Payton. First of all, Sean Payton wants full organizational control. So that means Brandon Beane is gone too. Second, it would cost you a first and more.
Yep.
First round draft pick and more with a team this up against the cap to go get Sean Payton. That's number 2. I mean, no one else other than Sean Payton, who is available right now to hire as head coach of the Buffalo Bills, even comes close to sniffing the jock of Sean McDermott.
Agreed.
So
Agreed.
that's why you don't replace him. And Jessica Tennis comes in with a great super chat, and she says, the only issue I have with McDermott is stay the course over and over again. His issue is he's making in season and in game changes. Reed embraces change, and this is, you mentioned the inflection point. I think, and we're about to get into this. I think Sean McDermott needs to sit down with himself to look in a mirror, and I think he needs to ask himself some cold hard truths, because he's got some friends on this coaching staff. Ken Dorsey, someone he's been with a long time in Carolina. Leslie Frazier, someone he's been with a long time. Mike Shula, who they brought in as an offensive consultant, somebody he's been with. There's a lot of people he's comfortable with. And with that comfortability comes complacency. We're about to get into it. I believe that both offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey should be fired. And I believe defensive coordinator Leslie Frazier should be fired as well, because I think Sean McDermott needs to breathe some life into this team, and there needs to be some schematic changes. On offense, they need to give Josh Allen more help. And I don't know if Ken Dorsey will ever be capable of doing that with his 5-man protection schemes. On defense, they need a defense like Lou Anarumos, who throws offenses different looks. Leslie Frazier runs the same defense every single play, and he puts it on the players to react. He doesn't switch things up. He doesn't confuse the offense. That needs to change. So Sean McDermott needs to look in the mirror this offseason, and he needs to make a change at these coordinator positions. But I just don't know if you can. And again, for the people who do want him out and the people who are throwing out that Phil Jackson analogy, I get it. I get it. But to me, Sean McDermott, even though he hasn't done what Mike Tomlin has done, he's pretty embedded into this organization like Mike Tomlin is with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's making decisions on the turf in the new stadium. Like, him and the owner are like this. Him and the GM and the owner are just so super tight. You fire him, the GM's got to go too. There's a certain faction of the locker room that would riot. The owner's never going to do it. Like, it's just not happening.
Yeah, and that's the other point that probably isn't going to get talked. Well, will now get talked about more, is like, he is embedded into the organization, and he is at the hip with Brandon Beane, right? And the Pagulas. And so, like, you really probably damage the goodwill that's been built up with McDermott, with the locker room. And I'm not saying that in an effort to get a championship, that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think that sets the team back more at this point than if you're the head coach. You can still have that consistency as far as, like, you're the man, sending the message. Brandon Beane's still the GM, and you can replace your coordinators if you choose to, and the team still potentially can get better with keeping those two guys still tied at the hip. So that's kind of where I'm at with the whole thing. And Vera says, as a fan, this is unacceptable. Josh with the same BS post game. I've had enough. I want results. And
I will say this too. I don't think I've ever seen Josh Allen that demoralized or that sort of out of it after a game. Like, he's taken some losses personally. He's taken some ownership over things. Like, I like the way he's approached the media, and he didn't do anything wrong either, sort of in the way he interacted with the media, or the in my opinion, the words that came out of his mouth. But you're right. Like, the body language, he just looked like a guy. And then you saw him towards the end of that game take that shot from Mike Hilton, and he's clutching his elbow again. Josh Allen looked like a guy who was just ready to be done, because he's just been getting the shit kicked out of him the entire second half of this football season. And he's been playing on what appears to be like a dead arm the entire second half of this football game. So, Vera, I understand where you're coming from, because I saw that too, but I also think this is a dude that's just been pushed to his limits. And yesterday was just a bridge too far for him. I don't know. What are your thoughts here?
I think it's frustration, right? I mean, I think it's not like it's the first year of this team going to the playoffs anymore, right? Where it's like, okay, we've kind of made our way to being the cream of the crop of the AFC. We're going to make some noise. We're like kind of the up and coming team. Like, we're not that team anymore. We're the team that has the expectations of Super Bowl now with Josh Allen at the helm the way the last 2 to 3 seasons have gone. So it's getting to the point now where the expectations are super high, super high, and the fan base is starved for a Super Bowl. And to see the team go out the way they went out yesterday is leaving a bad taste in people's mouths, and including Josh Allen's, because I think if you saw the Bills go out there and go toe to toe with the Bengals and lose at the end of the game on just like a really good football game that was back and forth, I don't know that you'd see that same type of reaction. I think it's the way this team lost.
Yeah,
It is the reason why you see that type of reaction.
RJ coming in with a great comment. He says that whole "I shouldn't need surgery" statement from Josh scares me to my core. That's where I sort of got the feeling like I just need rest and recovery is what he was saying. He was clutching that elbow towards the end of the game yesterday. Like he just seemed like a guy who, like I mentioned, just like it was a bridge too far. The Buffalo Bills pushed him to his limits, and that's why we're about to talk about the fact, Mattis S comes in and says, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me." Coaching failures last year with 13 seconds. Coaching failures again yesterday. Ken Dorsey's game plans. And again, I tried to stay positive for weeks and weeks and weeks because we were still winning and the DVOA was still good and the Bills were still doing what they needed to do in the regular season. But then the harsh realities of the postseason hit. And my goodness, did it show yesterday on the football field. So in my opinion, we got to protect Josh Allen better next year, not just with the offensive line, but with weapons and the scheme. Like the 5-man protections need to stop. Like they can't just be doing 5-man protections the entire game. Absolutely ridiculous. And then by chance comes in with what I also think is a great comment. We're going to get to Brandon Beane at some point today. He says, get ready for Beane to talk about how the Buffalo Bills need to fix the pass rush and the offensive line for the 4th year in a row and completely fail yet again. He literally said, first thing out of his mouth in the presser last year was, the number one thing we need to do this offseason is protect Josh Allen. How many new starters on the offensive line do we have? One. And it was Roger Saffold, who's been awful this year. Awful. And we're going to get to him today too, because he says he wants to come back to the Bills next year. If I'm the Buffalo Bills,
I bet he does. Yeah, I bet he does.
I lock that door. I lock, that Jamal Adams video where he's trying to get the Jets facility and the door is locked. That should be Roger Saffold on the next Bills Embedded. I mean, he's a great guy and I love, his tweets and his energy, but bad yesterday. He was bad all season. Pops Mafia says he was bad yesterday. But these coordinators, in my opinion, are a fair game. And I want to start with Leslie Frazier. I said after last season, and, when it didn't happen, I kind of shut up about it and just moved on. But I'm once again calling for the dismissal of defensive coordinator Leslie Frazier, whether it's him leaving on his own accord, whether it's him retiring, whether it's the team mutually parting ways, whether it's the team firing him, whatever it is. I do not want to see Leslie Frazier back here as defensive coordinator next year. This defense was complacent yesterday. I don't want to use the word complicated because I don't think the Bills defense is complicated, but what the Bills ask defenders to do is very, very complicated. The scheme's not complicated. What they ask guys individually to do is complicated. They ask Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde to do incredible things. They ask Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds to do incredible things. They ask their defensive linemen to generate pressure with just 4 guys, no blitzes. They ask their guys to do so much on defense that when guys get hurt, they can't replace them. There's no way they can replace them. And Leslie Frazier is so stubborn in his scheme that he just keeps running the same scheme out there week in and week out, despite having inadequate personnel to run that scheme. Well, it's not his fault. There's inadequate personnel. He's not adjusting to the players that he had on the field. They continue to be reactionary. They are not proactive. They can't generate a pass rush via a blitz. They have to have someone dominate in the front 4. You have to allocate all your resources every offseason to the defensive line because without it, Leslie Frazier's defense is useless. They cannot run man-to-man. They drafted a guy in the first round to try and do it, and they benched him to keep running soft zone. That 3rd and 4 in this football game where they just blitzed everybody and left 8 yards of cushion was insane. And don't put that on the players. That's on Leslie Frazier. I think a guy on Twitter, Bills GMDY, he said it best. The Bills are always taking punches on defense. They're never throwing them. He's not a bad defensive coordinator, but I think that this is an instance where there needs to be a change just for the sake of change. And the Buffalo Bills need to make a move here at defensive coordinator. What are your thoughts?
I think I agree. I do. And it pains me to say that, right? Because the advanced analytics and everything will tell you that the Bills had a good defense. But for me, it's gotten to the point now where this team during the regular season can win 12 or 13 games with a pretty good defense. But when it comes to the postseason, they have fallen flat now 3 years in a row under Leslie Frazier. And to me, that's where these coordinators need to make their money, right? Because it's well and good to say, hey, the Bills were the number 3 DVOA defense in 2022. But guess what? In the postseason, they didn't show up. And they didn't show up for the third year in a row. So the fact of the matter is that we can sit here and talk all we want about how good this defense has been. And they have personnel, regardless, I think, of whether you like Leslie Frazier's scheme or not. They have personnel still to be a good defense with another person running the show. But to me, the question comes down to, what is that relationship going to be like between McDermott and a possible replacement? And will it just be more of the same? I don't know if he's going, like, to me, that's where, like, I don't know the answer, right? Is he going to give a coordinator carte blanche to just do whatever they want with the defense? It doesn't seem likely that he would do that.
And that's where Charles G's coming. How do you guys feel about an in-house option like John Butler? I want no part of it. I don't want John Butler. I can easily see John Butler getting fired, being the scapegoat. Well, we're not going to fire Leslie. We'll fire John. I can see Eric Washington being the scapegoat because the defensive line was so bad. Like, I can see those guys being a scapegoat. I want no part of an in-house option. I want someone to come in here who's philosophically a little bit different, who's going to push Sean McDermott. And that's the point where I was getting at the top of the show. Sean's got to look in the mirror and be like, we've plateaued. I need to bring in some different voices. I would have loved to consider Jim Schwartz, but he's taken over where? In Cleveland now, I believe he's going. But Brian Flores is available. Vic Fangio is available. A couple of guys who are getting some run and some defensive coordinator interviews over the past couple of weeks. Sean Desai from Seattle, who was the Chicago Bears defensive coordinator. He's a Vic Fangio disciple. He didn't really have much to work with in Chicago. Got fired when Matt Nagy got fired, went to Seattle as the assistant head coach. He's an up-and-coming name. That's a different voice in the room. Ryan Nielsen from that Dennis Allen New Orleans Saints defense that consistently has been really good and really aggressive year after year. Ryan Nielsen, I would love him to give him an opportunity to come in here and be a defensive coordinator. I want a new voice. I want someone who's going to be proactive and not reactive. We were having a great conversation with Eric Turner in the Cover One group chat. The Buffalo Bills, when their front doesn't work, they don't change the front, is what he said. The Bills never change their front, which is like unheard of. They just tell the players to have better gap integrity and to be in a better spot. They put the onus on the player. They're like, just go out there and play better. They don't change the scheme. They don't change the front. They don't adjust. They don't adapt. They don't fit what they're doing to the personnel when guys are injured. They just roll out the same defense week after week after week. And that's disadvantageous because the offense knows exactly what they have to attack. There's no surprising them, at least pre-snap. Post-snap, Leslie Frazier's pretty good at that when he's got all of his dogs, when he's got Micah Hyde, when he's got Von Miller, when he's got a healthy secondary. When he doesn't and they can't do that, it's just so vanilla. Like, there needs to be a new voice in that room. I would love a Brian Flores or a Vic Fangio or some young up-and-coming position coach from a really good defense. Like, this is the hill I'm going to die on. I need Leslie Frazier out of here. I do.
And I think I'd be pretty comfortable with like Fangio or Flores. Actually, I'd really like Flores. That would be a pretty radical shift schematically from what we've been doing as far as like what he's traditionally done. And maybe he can kind of figure out whether the personnel we have would work for that. But I think this team is suited for a veteran coach on the defensive side of the ball, but maybe someone like a Flores who's had a chance to be a head coach and maybe obviously was in a tough situation. Fangio has been a head coach. I mean, Leslie Frazier like maybe that's like the common ground that Sean McDermott can find if we do replace Leslie Frazier. It's like, okay, maybe if you're Sean McDermott and you're not comfortable going all the way to the extreme and bringing a young and up and coming guy in, maybe you could justify or be more comfortable bringing a guy like Fangio or Flores, who have had head coaching experience as well. And maybe that's a common ground that he could find there. So the risk you run, right, is that like it's going to be more of the same of them being yes men. Now, I don't think Brian Flores is the type to be a yes man to Sean McDermott, and I don't think Vic Fangio would be either. So those two are interesting names, and it'll be very interesting to see if a change does get made, if it's just another yes man, because then it's just more of the same. Robert comes in with the super chat. Thanks, Robert. Josh was second behind Mahomes in most counting stats with a far worse O-line. He's as far from the problem as it can be. With a defensive-minded head coach, it's on McD to scheme with less and give 17 help.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, and we're going to talk about this later on in the show too. Sean McDermott is a defensive coach. The Bills have allocated a majority of their resources onto the defensive side of the ball. I think Yards Per Pass had a great tweet today on Twitter. He was like, in football, you can't be great on both sides of the ball. A lot of times that's just a pipe dream. You got to pick one side of the ball. And if you're the Buffalo Bills and Sean McDermott is your defensive coordinator, and for now, Leslie Frazier is your defensive coordinator, all of that experience, all that wealth of knowledge on defense, that's where the Bills should be skimping on the talent, because the coaching should be able to make up for it. You should be loading the offense with a perfect offensive line, with skill position players out the wazoo, because you know your offensive coordinator with Josh Allen at the helmet quarterback could be a constant revolving door. So you want to make their life as easy on them as possible. And the Buffalo Bills aren't doing that because Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier's scheme needs all this elite, immense talent, because they're asking guys to win one-on-ones up front every single play, because they're asking their linebackers to do 50 million things, because they're asking their safeties to be superhuman, because they're asking people in their secondary to read and react to the quarterback's eyes, because they're a reactive defense, which calls for like elite talent. That's a problem. That is a problem. And you're 100%, Robert. We can't be keeping investing what we are on defense. We got to start investing more on offense. So in my opinion, the scheme's got to change, because there can't be that much of an investment on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah. And I mean, at this point, it's kind of embarrassing, right? Because you've invested so much on the defensive side of the ball. Now, I'm going to kind of remove Von Miller from this conversation, because obviously he got injured and he was playing really well before he got injured. But from a draft capital standpoint, you've invested in Boogie Basham, Gregory Rousseau, AJ Epinesa. And Gregory Rousseau looks very good, but like AJ Epinesa and Boogie Basham are role players. They're not like, when you draft a guy in the second round, you expect them to make an impact. And like, hindsight's obviously 2020, but like some of these draft picks have really not necessarily panned out. And a lot of those have been on the defensive line. Ed Oliver, people are talking about in the comment section a lot, a top 10 pick. And I said it, like he's had great moments, but he's not great consistently. And that's the last time the Bills had a top 10 pick. And is he an elite talent? He's a talent. I mean,
and Steve Link comes in and says, what elite talent? Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, both all pros. Trey White, prior to the injury, and the Bills are expecting him at some point to come back to his prior form, was a consistent, one of the best corners in football. Matt Milano, first team all pro. Tremaine Edmonds, probably the fourth or fifth best middle linebacker in football. Ed Oliver, high ceiling first round pick. Gregory Rousseau, high ceiling first round pick. You paid a ton of money to guys like Jordan Phillips, Tim Settle, Daquan Jones. You invested a lot of draft capital in AJ Epinesa and Gregory Rousseau. Or I'm sorry, excuse me, Boogie Basham. Like that, all of that investment. And then what do we get on offense? What have we got? What have we got on offense? Spencer Brown, a project right tackle. Gabriel Davis, a 4th round pick. Devin Singletary, a 4th round pick. Dawson Knox, a 4th round pick.
I mean, Dawson.
We finally got James Cook, 2nd round pick. Like, it's insane.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, we can go back and play the clips from shows last year. Like I was all about like trying to invest in this offensive line in the draft. Like I wanted Zion Johnson. I wanted, guys like Kenyon Green, like, and we went the other way. Look, and I like Kyer Elam. I think that was a good pick. But at some point you can't be expecting like Spencer Brown type guys like to just always solve your problems, right? At some point you need to invest in just pure talent and guys that have played against really good competition. And so look, I'll be banging that drum again this year, I'm sure, with us picking whatever it is, 29th or whatever it's going to be
27th.
for 27th for offensive line. I mean, I will be banging
or
that
a wide
drum
receiver
again.
or a wide receiver.
Something on the offensive side of the ball.
We're not going to talk. I think our solemn promise.
Yeah, we won't get into
talk
draft
about
right now.
No, we're not going to talk about. Maybe we won't talk about Bijan Robinson. I don't know. We might have to have a no Bijan talk. Like if it happens, it happens. We'll react to it, but we're not going to maybe debate that because that might derail our off season. But Jason Sugg makes a great comment. He says, Mike Florio said, redo the offense and try to outscore the opponents next year. I've been saying that for 2 months. Like I've already like 2 months ago, I started like tinkering and figuring out what I wanted this 2003 version or 2023 version of the Buffalo Bills to look like. And my first was like, I'm at the point where let Edmonds and Poyer walk. Let them both walk, right? Like Pops Mafia says, re-sign Edmonds, please. We probably will. And it's not a bad idea if they do. I get it. I'm almost at the point where like, let them both walk and the defensive coaches figure it the frick out with free bargain bin free agents, mid-tier free agents, and middle round draft picks. Go figure it out. Like the offense has had to figure it out the last couple of years. You go do that. I want wide receiver. I want offensive line. Like that's what I want. Like another running back. Like this team needs to load up on offense and they need to make it insanely easy for the offensive coordinator. And that leads us to the next conversation here. And that's Ken Dorsey.
Yep.
Listen, I like I said, I've tried to be positive. I haven't been too negative about Ken Dorsey. There is the one hand, like the angel on one shoulder saying it was his first year. The offense was statistically good. Josh Allen and him get along. Josh Allen wants him. He's not going anywhere. Just be patient like you were with Brian Dable. Give it some time. Everything will work out. And then on the other side, there's the devil on my shoulder that's just out for blood. And that person says Ken Dorsey has no imagination. He has no creativity. There's no scheming anything easy. I mean, they were getting blitzed to death, and Reggie Gilliam had one snap on offense. They were 5-man protection the entire game. This offense is 80% Josh Allen making plays off script. And even if Josh Allen likes that, that's not what's best for Josh Allen because this offense is too Josh Allen centric. And we saw what happened today, and we saw how demoralized and how pummeled and how beat down he is at the end of this football season. Lou Anarumo coached circles around Ken Dorsey. He had no reaction, no answers to the looks that Cincinnati was giving them. It was all, hey, Josh, avoid these 3 guys in your face and then go throw the ball up at somebody. Again, can he grow? Can he evolve? Can he learn from this? Yes. Was the Bills offense statistically fine this year? Yes. But since the second half of that Green Bay game, nothing has looked easy for the Buffalo Bills on offense this year. And you have to ask yourself if he deserves to keep the keys to this offense. Frank Reich is available. Jim Caldwell is available. Todd Monken from Georgia. Maybe you can go get that SEC national championship offensive coordinator, kind of like you did with Brian Dable. I took some flack for putting this name out there, Bill O'Brien. There are experienced play callers who have proven to be scheme diverse, who have proven to been able to be creative and make things easy for their quarterback and do all these various different things. They are available. They are out there. Do you make a move here? I would.
Hey, maybe it won't matter when Ken Dorsey gets the Panthers head coaching job. But in reality, like those names are nice. And like, again, kind of like the relationship between Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier, the consideration now is kind of the relationship between Ken Dorsey and Josh Allen. But Josh Allen getting his ass handed to him and getting hit all the time can't feel good, right? And the job of the offensive coordinator is to make life easy, obviously, for your quarterback and the whole offense. And look, Brian Daboll never coached the top 15, top half of the NFL offense as a coordinator before he got to the Bills. And he and Josh Allen worked magic together after a few years and parlayed that to a head coaching gig. Ken Dorsey, trying to make his own mark and make his own way, obviously kind of went away from some of the things that Brian Daboll did in his time here. But I will say this about Ken Dorsey is like, he's very competitive. I get that. He now can at least self-reflect on his own play calling after year one, has his own tape to watch from his own play calling, and there's a chance that he can improve. So I think if I'm like weighing, like, and I'm balancing like which coordinator, if I can only pick one that I'd want to stay, it would probably be Dorsey to stay and Frazier to be gone, because I would think that like there's more room for improvement for a guy like Ken Dorsey than there is for Leslie Frazier at this stage in their respective careers. So let's get to these super chats here.
Yeah, we'll get to the super chats too, but just a moment. But Jessica Tennis says, yes, Josh likes and wants that. In my opinion, Josh doesn't trust anyone but himself to make plays. I agree with that. And that might be why he likes Dorsey so much, because he likes just dropping back and sort of being given free recess to go out there and make plays off script. I mean, the Bills could easily run it back with Ken Dorsey, right? But if they do, they have to go out and they need to add another dynamic running back. They need to add 2 receivers who are fast. Someone in the comment section earlier, like right at the top of the show, said, maybe we missed Emmanuel Sanders more than we thought. Bingo. Like, you're spot on. And Eric Turner's been saying this in the Cover One group chat. The Bills need receivers who can get open and get open quickly. Right now, we have a separation issue outside of Stephon Diggs. And when Josh Allen is scrambling around and these guys aren't creating any separation, it's tough for Josh to sort of make those plays off script because he's throwing those contested catches. Gabriel Davis is a 52% catch rate, 104 targets. He caught 52 of them. Like, that's bad. That's real bad. And that tells me that the receivers aren't separating. So the Buffalo Bills, if they decide to stick with Ken Dorsey, they better go out and draft Josh Downs, Jalen Hyatt, Zay Flowers. Like, they better be out drafting all the speedy wide receivers in the world because they're going to need it.
And it gets back to the question, the overarching point of like, each season that goes by now becomes that much more magnified, right? Each season that goes by, the pressure goes up just a little bit more to get it done in the playoffs. And to be honest, it's like a risk reward proposition, right? Do you risk letting a guy like Ken Dorsey go at the risk that he might be able to improve and keep some consistency in that relationship with Allen? Or do you say, look, we have to try to go further in the playoffs and we're willing to risk and make that change at this position, even though we were still good offensively, but we need to be better. Are you willing to do that as an organization? And that will be the interesting thing that happens over the next, who knows how many weeks. But by chance comes in with a super chat. Ford Oliver, 9th overall. Moss, Epinesa, Brown, Basham in the span of 3 years. How many more is being allowed?
Yeah, it hasn't been great. I'm not gonna lie to you. It has not been great on day 2 of the draft. Day 1, like, the Ed Oliver one is tough because someone else was making a comment about Ed Oliver being useless earlier too. When Ed Oliver is healthy, Ed Oliver is good, but Ed Oliver is dinged up a lot. And unlike a lot of other superstar players, because I remember watching a game this year, it was like, Aaron Donald's hurt. How effective is Aaron Donald going to be? And he just went out there and absolutely crushed the competition playing hurt. I believe he was playing the Arizona Cardinals. That's why I was watching the game. Ed Oliver, he's got a knee injury, he's got an ankle injury, he's got a shoulder injury. Whatever injury he's playing through, he's not playing through it well. And he's getting swallowed up. Like, you really got to ask yourself if you want to go beyond the 5th year extension with, or the 5th year, extension with Ed Oliver. Zach Moss, we traded him. AJ Epinesa, nothing more than a replacement level rotational defensive end. Basham, nothing more than a replacement level rotational defensive end. Cody Ford, gone. They traded Wyatt Teller and they kept like a guy like Cody Ford. Like, it's just, it all stings and it all adds up. And yeah, drafting is hard, but it's really different. You know what stings the most, Dave? What stings the most, and I'm not trying to toot our own horn here because I'm tooting the comment section's horn too. We put a lot, we invest a ton into draft prep, like a ton. And the people in the comments section do too. They do their research and they listen to smart people and they formulate their own opinions. Hardly ever does Brandon Bean do anything remotely close to what we envision. Hardly ever.
I did call the Kyrie Elam pick though last year.
Yeah, but you called it, but you didn't want it.
Not
You didn't
necessarily,
want
yeah,
Kyrie Elam.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, you know,
That's fair.
they took Gregory Rousseau, who, again, we don't mind, but you wanted a guy who had 3 picks in the wild card round. Sante Samuel Jr.
Yeah.
Terrell Bernard. I love Terrell Bernard, the player. I wouldn't have drafted him any higher than the 5th round. Why? Because all he is a Matt Milano backup and a special teamer. Tremaine Edmonds got hurt this year. Terrell Bernard didn't play. We didn't play any 43 defense this year to put Terrell Bernard in the field. Terrell Bernard was inactive in the game yesterday. A 3rd round pick. Now, if Matt Milano's contract was up and Matt Milano was walking, okay, cool. I understand it. Matt Milano's under contract. He's not replacing the guy who's not under contract. And you use a 3rd round pick on him. That shows how little you value your 3rd round pick. That a special teams linebacker who, if Matt Milano gets hurt, can step in, is what you value. You passed on Dylan Parham for that. A guy who started almost every game for the Raiders this year. Was Dylan Parham perfect? No, he was not. He had some bad games this year. I saw some Raiders games this year where Dylan Parham struggled. But guess what? He's going to grow into that position, and he's going to be an every down left guard in the National Football League. And you passed on that for Terrell Bernard? I mean, come on. Sometimes it's just, you draft a man-to-man cornerback because you want to run more man-to-man, and then you don't do it. You bench him after 2 series to run more soft zone. I'm baffled. I'm baffled by it.
Yeah, and here's the thing that, like, we have to remember where we are in the arc of this journey towards hopefully winning a Super Bowl. The reason that we're talking like this is because the expectations have changed dramatically since 2020, right? When Josh Allen broke out and had that incredible 2020 season, that huge improvement from 2019. Obviously, we know the Bills were in the playoffs against the Texans, but that was really the start of, like, okay, we're on the upswing. When he had that 2020, things changed. Things changed expectations-wise. Things changed as far as expectations on what to do and what kind of impact players to get from the draft. Like, the whole feeling and expectation around the entire organization changed when Josh Allen showed that he was going to be an elite quarterback in the NFL, top 5, top 3, top 1, right? And it's not fair to Josh, right? These expectations are what they are, but he is a unicorn quarterback, and if the Bills can't win a Super Bowl with Josh Allen as their quarterback, there's going to be a lot of hindsight in the future about this era of Bills football. So anyway, Justin comes in, says, look at Bean's 2nd, 3rd round picks from Ford, Moss, Epinesa, Bastian, Bernard. That's 5 premium selections.
And Ferris, we'll get back to your super chat in a second, but this sort of just builds off the one we're talking about. I just pulled up the Cincinnati Bengals draft history, and I want to read to you the Cincinnati Bengals draft history. These are their first 4 picks in the draft the last couple of years. Dax Hill. They went Dax Hill, Cam Taylor-Britt, Zachary Carter, Cordell Volson this year. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a team in the AFC Championship game. Dax Hill hasn't played a ton, but guess what? Flowers went down. Dax Hill made a play yesterday. He's going to be a part of that team for a long time once J.C. Bates leaves in free agency. Cam Taylor-Britt made a ton of plays yesterday. Zachary Carter, an effective wave defensive lineman. Cordell Volson, he was their starting left guard. 4 rookies who are contributing on that AFC Championship bound football team. You look at their draft from the year previous. Jamar Chase, okay, that's a given. Top 5 pick, whatever. Jackson Carman looked pretty darn good at left tackle yesterday. He's an offensive lineman that they can continue to develop and play around with over the next couple of years. Joseph Osai in the 3rd round, Cam Sample in the 4th round. Those are both rotational defensive ends who are just as good as AJ Epinesa and Boogie Basham. We didn't use a 2nd round pick on them. They used a 3rd and a 4th. You look the year previous to that. Joe Burrow, again, early pick. That's a given. But T. Higgins early in the 2nd. You know, the Bills could have had a guy like T. Higgins at the end of the 1st. I believe that was the Stephon Diggs year, though.
Yep.
Logan Wilson in the 3rd, starting linebacker. Akeem Davis Gaither in the 4th, rotational linebacker. Not a 3rd-round pick on a rotational linebacker, a day 3 pick. You look at the year previous to that, Billy Price, that was a bust. They screwed up on Billy Price. 2nd round, Jesse Bates. Insanely good free safety. 3rd round, Sam Hubbard. Then you look at the year previous to that, John Ross. They missed on John Ross, but Joe Mixon, Jordan Willis, Carl Lawson. Like, this is a team, Sam Hubbard in the 3rd round. This is a team that's been drafting good on day 2 of the draft and on early day 3 of the draft. That's how good football teams are built. And the Buffalo Bills are not drafting well. Day 2, early day 3. Their first round picks are decent. They've hit on some late ones, but day 2 has been bad. And that's how good football teams are built.
Yeah, and I will say this too is like Brandon Beane gets a pass, right? I mean, he drafted Josh Allen, he got the Bills out of cap hell when he first got here. He's made some really good moves, but I've said this multiple times in the past, no GM bats 1,000. Most GMs don't even bat, 333, which is considered a good batting average in, baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the drafts have not, like, the drafts largely have been underwhelming, right? I mean, like, let's be realistic. Like, Dawson Knox has been really pretty good. Devin Singletary has been what he is, but outside of Josh Allen and I guess Tremaine Edmonds, right? You can put him in that mix. Like, Brandon Beane's drafts have been underwhelming, and it's kind of unfortunate because we've invested so much in that defensive line. So anyway, Ferris comes in and says, do you think if we brought in Vic Fangio, for example, and switched to a 34 front, it would unlock Ed Oliver as a defensive end? Just a thought.
I think that one of the things that, and Greg Tomset has been banging the drum about this, is like the 34 and the 43 don't really just exist anymore. It's like the 43, the defensive ends have their hands down. 34, the defensive ends have their hands up. That's really the only difference. What you're getting with Vic Fangio is edge rushers who are going to be standing up as opposed to having their hand down. And you're going to get a lot of, cover 2 deep shell. Vic Fangio is not much of a blitzer either. He's mostly about, that bend but don't break style, but it's been more effective because he does it a little bit differently than Leslie Frazier has. So I wouldn't be too much worried about that. And I do think guys like Ed Oliver and guys like Gregory Rousseau might, see a little bit more of an uptick under a different defensive line coach, because Eric Washington has been underwhelming. If Leslie Frazier doesn't go, let's hope Eric Washington goes, because man, those guys have not developed. And who knows, under a new defensive coordinator, maybe some of these guys who are good but not great can blossom in to great. John DeMarchi comes in and says, facts, Josh is not a short to intermediate passer who unloads in 2.5 seconds. Okay, fine. Then build a wall in front of Josh and get Bijan Robinson to help cut the necessary, figure out the rest. I'm in agreement there for the most part. And I think building a wall is more than just getting the 5 best offensive linemen, because I feel like this team has done Josh Allen a disservice with all the 5-man protections and sending so many people out into cover into the field on every play. You don't need to send all 5 guys out all the time. Like, where is a guy in line to block? Where's the 12 personnel? Where's the fullback? Where are the guys sort of doing the dirty work to give Josh Allen the time to set something up downfield? Not to mention that outside Stephon Diggs, they don't really have a separator. So I think they can do more than just build a wall. I think that's more of a philosophy, more so than just getting the 5 best offensive linemen. But totally in agreement with you there. Like, totally in agreement with you there. Like, get Josh Allen all the help. If you get Josh Allen a competent play caller, you get Josh Allen a couple more receivers and an offensive line, they're going to score 40 points every game. How much defense do you really need to play? So I'm totally with you there, John. What are your thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been very pro investing in the offensive line for a couple years now. And I'd be like, to me, signing a guy like Saffold in the offseason last year was okay, but I still felt like even with that, they could have or should have invested in the offensive line because, again, we're going to have the same questions this offseason like we've had this last 2 off seasons is, what is this offensive line going to look like in 2023 now? And it's going to, again, at least right now, still one of the biggest question marks on this team. And if you have the same question marks year in and year out about the same position groups, that's not a good trend. So Robert comes in with a super chat, taking Basham before Creed and Bernard before Parham is so brutal. Yeah. A lot of people share those thoughts with you, Robert.
And that's another thing too, is like I said, I'm not trying to toot our own horn or sound narcissistic or anything, but like the fans are screaming it, dude. Like we were screaming for Creed Humphrey. We were screaming for Dylan Parham from the rooftops. And they sometimes they just think they're smarter. Like if you asked any draft, like legitimate draft website, not some of these, there are some of these guys who like, it's like, should they really be getting paid to create draft content? Their stuff's bad. But if you look at like the legitimate people, like the legitimate scouts out there, the Jordan Reeds of the world, the Joe Marinos of the world, the great work that like Anthony and Eric do, like you look at those, you look at those guys. Dane Brugler from The Athletic. There are some other guys that I'm forgetting too, and I apologize for that. If you would have put them in charge of the Buffalo Bills, they would have taken Creed Humphrey over Boogie Basham. They wouldn't have doubled up on defensive end. If you put them in that position in the third round, they would have taken Dylan Parham over Terrell Bernard. No one would have made those two picks. Now, we loved Boogie in the pre-draft process, so that's on us. I mean, we both love Boogie, but
we still question the back-to-back defensive ends, though.
Question the back-to-back defensive ends. And again, you're drafting a defensive end and then asking him to shed 30 pounds. Like, what are we doing here? Like, what in the hell are we doing here? They did that with two guys. Two. It's weird. It's a really weird energy. Jason Parker comes in and says, gave you guys a super chat because you're speaking the truth. Always appreciate it, Jason. Hopefully we're not too over the top tonight. John DeMarshi comes in with another super chat. Always appreciate you, Johnny. Says soft bet zone, bend, don't break. Works regular season versus mid QBs, not versus elite QBs in the playoffs. Brady, Burrow, Mahomes, eat that alive. I agree with you. Like our inability to play man-to-man defense, frustrating. It's really frustrating. And when you draft a guy to go play man-to-man defense and then don't trust him to put him on the field, bad coaching, bad scouting, like it's one of the two. You either didn't scout properly and he wasn't who you thought he was, or you haven't coached him up properly. It's one of those two things with Kyrie Elam, but it's the fact that Leslie Frazier's like, no, my scheme is good. Players go out there and perform it better is his response.
It's very
whenever things don't work. It's all right, let's switch things up. Let's make things different. Let's confuse the quarterback. It's just, hey, players, go do what I said better. That's his game plan.
And drafting Kyrie Elam to me was a step in the right direction, right? But then it's up to the coaches to then use him, right? In that way.
Mm-hmm.
An athletic, fast, cornerback with traits that we didn't necessarily have in the room already.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. And they just didn't see it. So Justin comes in, says the Pats gave Mac Jones was 17 for 17 on their 3 TD drives, was super worried about the D after that, considering Mahomes and Burrow were waiting. And that's a really good point.
Yeah. They just got eaten alive like the whole second half of the season. And just nothing was done schematically to fix it. It was what we're doing as coaches is the right thing. The players aren't performing it correctly. Like, it's just frustrating. Like, the best coaches take what they have and make it work. They're not perfect. Kansas City's not perfect. That defense has a long way to go. Man, I love Steve Spagnuolo because he'll take shit and he will polish it. He will polish it. He will polish it.
And the
Leslie Frazier can't.
And think about this, right? The Chiefs statistically are like defensively are really not a great defense, but in the moments that matters, they have Chris Jones and they come up with, they find a way to make it happen. And so Steve Spagnuolo's defense is statistically may not look great, DVOA or things like that, but in the big moments, like there's a reason that he's been a defensive coordinator and he's been a head coach and he's been a defensive coordinator now for multiple Super Bowl teams, is because it works, right? It works in when it matters. So anyway, I won't get too much into that, but
hey, we are 55 minutes into the show And we've gotten so off track that I forgot to mention that this show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. Four great locations in Western New York, in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it's just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. If you are looking to eat your feelings this weekend, head on over to picassospizza.net. Stefon Diggs. We got to talk about Stefon Diggs. Obviously, the big hoopla over him storming out the locker room seconds after the game, before the coaches even had a chance to get back into the locker room. You saw him sort of having a spat with Josh Allen on the sidelines in the closing and the waning minutes of that game as well. To me, and this is my personal opinion, other people disagree, I wasn't nice about it. I wasn't nice about the way the beat reporters were treating it. To me, they were just vultures, and they were buzzing, and they were looking for a story. The headline of one of the articles this morning was, "Is Stefon Diggs mad at Josh Allen?" I can't wait until next week when we find out who Matt Milano's biggest crush is and who's been spreading cooties around the locker room. I get it. It went viral. To me, it's a non-story. These players, they put their heart and their soul into this. Let them cope with whatever way they want to cope. I've always been really uncomfortable with reporters having such close access to the players after a game. I'm not saying the players shouldn't be held accountable, but like, maybe they should have a day to process it. Like, kudos to Greg and Aaron for doing what they do. I couldn't do a post-game show immediately following a game. I'd say a whole bunch of stupid stuff. I'm already saying stupid stuff on today's show, and I've had 24 hours to process. 48 hours, I probably would have been a little bit more nuanced in some of my responses here. So what are your thoughts on the whole Stefon Diggs situation? And I'll get to his comments too that he made on Twitter today in response to some of the reporters questioning his captainship.
Personally, I appreciated what he did. Like he is expecting a certain standard of not only himself but the team, and he wants to win above all else. Like, as a fan, how can you not appreciate that? Like, I don't care like if he says it on social media. Like, that's up to him. He didn't say anything bad. He didn't say anything negative about his teammates. He didn't say anything like that made me think that like he wasn't a good teammate. Like, if anything, it proved to me how much he wants to win and how much that this means to him. And to me, I respect that and I appreciated that from Stefon Diggs. So look, like, he's saying what a lot of us are feeling anyway, right? Like, we expected this team to play to a certain standard. He expected this team and himself to be to a certain standard, and they absolutely got demolished. And so, like, I totally get where he's coming from. So guess what? Like, I'm good with it. And in fact, I would like to, Charles, perfect. Like, more of that.
And the audacity of Jay Skursky. He let his teammates down. He's a captain. He should have to face the music just like the rest of them. Not a single person in that locker room gave a shit that he walked out. They know, they understand that that's how he's processing. If that's how they needed to process, they would have done the same thing too. No one in that locker room is mad at Stefon Diggs. No one. Guess what? Within a week, Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs, whatever issue there is, it will be resolved. Because at the end of the day, Stefon Diggs isn't going anywhere. Stefon Diggs knows the grass isn't greener on the other side. And, he's played with a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, so he knows how good he's got it here with a guy like Josh Allen. They're legitimately best friends.
They both want to win, and they're best friends. Like, they both want to win. When you both want to win and things aren't going your way, that's fine. Frustration's going to happen. Like, it's going to happen.
And to me, like, maybe there's a point where Diggs is still just like sort of ramping up and he's ready to go, and Josh is just beat down, right? Like, that could be a part of it too, where they're just mentally in a different state, and that'll get sorted out over the offseason. I'm not worried about that. Stefon Diggs' comments on Twitter today: "You want me to be okay with our level of play when it's not up to the standard? ? Nah. Want me to be okay with losing? Nah." And then I also believe he said it's easier to report on my actions than deal with, or report on what happened on the field, something to that extent. So some statistics here that are alarming. Like here's why Stephon Diggs is upset, and he has every right to be upset. And this goes back to the conversation about Ken Dorsey and 5-man protections. You guys saw that you guys might not have seen this, but on Twitter, Aaron Quinn posted a clip of some of the plays. And there was one where the ball was snapped and it was a 3-man pressure. And the 5 off Roger Saffold just got thrown over like a rag doll. Spencer Brown didn't even touch the edge rusher. And Josh Allen is running for his life against a 3-man pass rush. After these two guys get past their offensive linemen, Saffold and Spencer Brown, all the offensive linemen just stop. Ryan Bates is the only one who blocked through the entire play. There's a still image of Josh Allen running for his life and those 5 guys, four of those 5 guys just standing there. Right? So it's hard to do what you want to do and to feed your alpha the football when that's the kind of stuff that you're dealing with. But here is a great tweet that I saw here from a guy on Twitter at Popes FFH. He's a fantasy football guy on Twitter that I follow. He posts some good stuff, but here's a statistic. Diggs' stats down the stretch split between first half and second half. The divisional round game, the game that they just played. In the first half, he had 3 catches for 27 yards. In the second half, he had 1 catch for 8 yards. In the wild card game, he went 7 for 114 in the first half, didn't catch a single ball in the second half. Week 18 against who we play week 18? New England.
Patriots. Yeah.
5 catches, 49 yards in the first half, 2 for 55 and a touchdown in the second half. Week 16, blanked in the first half, 2 for 26 in the second half. Week 15, 3 for 30, 2 for 30. We're not getting him the ball, and when we do, it's only in one half. It's not consistent. This dude should be getting 20 targets a game. 15 to 20 targets a game. You should be looking to get the ball into his hands. And down the stretch of this season, the Buffalo Bills weren't doing it. He has every right to be upset. And if as a captain, maybe he doesn't want to go in there and say, Ken Dorsey's an idiot. And so he separated himself from that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Which you can't blame him. I mean, look at what the Cardinals did and it's not a totally fair comparison, but DeAndre Hopkins was suspended for the first 6 games, right? He comes back, and whether it was Kyler Murray, Colt McCoy, whatever, like he had that one game I know with McSorley where he didn't do anything, but that dude was getting like 15 targets a game right off the bat coming back from the suspension. Like, and it's kind of the Cardinals, it's kind of a similar situation to what the Bills had, right? Like they have that clear alpha in DeAndre. They have a guy that they think is going to be their number 2 in Hollywood Brown. And then they have some other pieces around like Rondell Moore. It's very similar, right? The Bills have Stephon Diggs. They got Gabe Davis, who's kind of like their number 2. And then McKenzie maybe is their Rondell. But they weren't afraid to give DeAndre Hopkins 15 to 20 targets a game right when he came back. And that's with the Cardinals with guys like Colt McCoy, right? So you're telling me the Bills can't do that with Stephon Diggs? Yeah, they can. They can.
Matt Spies comes in, or Matt Spies comes in and says, we need nastiness everywhere. And I agree with that. And here's the frustrating part. And I believe it was By Chance who might've said it at the top of the show, or somebody else said at the top of the show, where I saw it in a tweet. It's like, how many years is Brandon Beane going to sit at a podium at the end of the season and go, we need to protect Josh Allen better, and we need to generate more pass rush? The Bills were dominated on both the offensive and the defensive line in this football game. And it's the weather's not an excuse, because the Bengals players had no problem dominating or getting a footing. Roger Saffold has been unequivocally bad all season long. Like, people want to rip on Deion Dawkins. Deion Dawkins has had to play next to Roger Saffold all year. He's playing with one hand tied behind his back. Same with Mitch Morse. People want to criticize Mitch Morse. Is Mitch Morse perfect? No. But he's also played with one hand tied behind his back, having to play against Roger Saffold this year. We're going to get into more of the roster management stuff next week when we break down the roster. I'd love to see Ryan Bates kick to left guard and us replace, right guard this offseason, but we'll get to more of that. But the offensive line pushed around like a rag doll. And then here's another NFL next gen stats. The Buffalo Bills, right? So good all season this season, or at least for most of the season, stopping the run. But I tweeted this out before the game. I was like, man, Ed Oliver has not looked the same since the shoulder injury. Jordan Phillips has been playing with the torn rotator cuff. He hasn't looked the same since his injury. Daquan Jones is out. I tweeted before the game. I'm like, is this the day where Joe Mixon finally finds his groove and the Cincinnati Bengals run all over us? And sure enough, that's what they did. NFL Next Gen Stats. Joe Mixon averaged 2.6 yards before contact in the divisional round, his most in a game since week 14, 2019. The man got 3 yards past the line of scrimmage before anyone put a hand on him in this football game. The Bills allowed a season-high 85 yards before contact. In the regular season, they allowed the fewest yards before contact when they had healthy defensive tackles at 0.8. The Buffalo Bills, who had been pretty damn good against the run this year, completely just in the most important game of the year, absolutely dominated. Injuries played a role, but also, I mean, come on, pride has got to be a thing.
There was at one point the Bengals were averaging over 7 yards a carry. They end up with 172 rushing yards in this game. Mixon goes over 100, 5.3 a carry for him. Even Samaje Perine averaged just under 5 a carry. And the worst part about it, like you said, is like these guys were getting ahead of steam before hand was even put on them. Like they were falling forward for 5-6 yards in this game. And even when the Bills were able to kind of get penetration, even they were able to get hands on these guys, they weren't able to bring them down right away, and they were still able to get yards after contact. And like I said in the pregame, first and second down was brutal to the Bills in this game defensively. And like without stopping the Bengals on first and second down, they really had no chance. And then, of course, what did they do in multiple third and longs? They gave it up anyway. So look, just all around bad. But and Jessica's got a good comment here. Saffold's a run blocker, not a pass blocker. When the Bills got him, Bills decided not to run the ball consistently. And that's true. He is definitely a better run blocker than pass blocker, but in any case, maybe not a fit for this team.
How about Daquan Jones too? So Charles G comes in and says Daquan Vaughn had great seasons. The pass rush win rate, the Bills' pass rush pressure rate went from 4th in the league to 27th after Von Miller towards ACL. I believe that was a statistic that was thrown out in the broadcast yesterday. And Daquan Jones, I mean, you saw how his absence was felt in that football game against the run. So those were 2 hits. It was unfortunate the Buffalo Bills did not have those 2 guys up. And that's the argument for like, don't fire Leslie Frazier. They didn't have Von Miller and Daquan Jones and Micah Hyde. It's not his fault. Still think it's his fault, but it is what it is. Yeah. So I'll tell you what, I think we've exhausted every conversation we could have about this game and stuff. Next week is really going to be our big roster breakdown, but maybe we can sort of, do a quick little preview here. So again, now we're hitting the off season and sort of the tone of the show shifts. We're not the kind of show that's going to sit here and do a, let's break down the top 10 Josh Allen touchdowns this past season. There's a place for it. I'm not knocking those kind of shows, but like, that's just not our style. I don't know about you, Dave, but I've already started a couple of Senior Bowl spreadsheets. So I
got to get on that.
This show is going to get heavy into roster deconstruction over the next couple of weeks. Cover One's going to have a ton of guys out. I think we got like 4 or 5 guys heading out to Mobile for the Senior Bowl. We're obviously not going to be there. You're in Cary. I'm in Phoenix. So we're not going to be there for the Senior Bowl, unfortunately, but we'll have boots on the ground and we'll be talking Senior Bowl and draft. We'll be talking free agency, all of the big picture stuff over the next couple of weeks. And I think the biggest question heading into this offseason, Dave, is Jordan Poyer, unrestricted free agent. Tremaine Edmonds, unrestricted free agent. What are your thoughts on where the Bills should allocate resources? Should they attempt to re-sign both? Should they prioritize one over the other? Do you think one of them deserves to just walk? The Buffalo Bills shouldn't even consider re-signing them, or should they let them both go and focus and concentrate their money elsewhere? What are your thoughts on these 2 big ticket free agents?
Well, let's see what the new defensive coordinator thinks.
No, that's a conversation. Look, yeah, I mean, that's true. Like that's a conversation to have.
Kind of half joking, but in reality, like right now, January, right after this loss, like the knee-jerk reaction is like, if you're gonna, I think for me, if you're gonna pay one of them, I think for me right now it's Edmonds. I think Poyer, has done everything. Like, he's done everything for this team. And I have nothing but absolute respect for Jordan Poyer and what he's done for this team. Battled through injuries this year just to get it out on the field. But it's going to be a tough call to see what happens with him. But I think ultimately he's probably done in Buffalo. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that Tremaine's back, but it does give a more likely chance that Tremaine could be back. And Jason says Jason said Edmund, they're both going to walk. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be interesting. Steelers will go after Edmonds as Pops. I mean, wouldn't be surprised at that. It's hard to care about any players at all until we see coaching changes. And that's kind of what I was like somewhat alluding to, right? Is like, are there going to be coaching changes? And if so, how will that potentially affect what the Bills do as far as bringing back some of these free agents? That will be interesting. The only reason not, I agree with that, Jason. His performance and what he gives to the team is worth re-signing, but I don't know that the Bills, I just don't see, he probably will get more money from another team because of what he's done here and the fact that he's been an all-pro. But I just don't know that the Bills are going to be that team to do it. So
yeah, I mean, on the final year of his contract, he hyperextended his elbow in training camp. He fractured 2 ribs at one point this season. Remember, he had to drive the 15 hours to play against Kansas City. He played on a torn meniscus to finish the season. He took that brutal shot to end the season. I mean, the man has just been, taken apart and stitched together all season. And the Bills were 13-1 in the games that he was able to play. So that should be, 100% commendable there for Jordan Poyer. If there's any way to bring him back, you bring him back. But it looks like that's going to be a tough reality. And there are a couple of safeties in the draft that I got my eye on, and we'll get to that over the next couple of weeks. Roy Collins says, y'all doing an XFL season preview show? Man, I'm so pumped. I'm so pumped for the XFL to be back. I'm a DC Defenders guy at heart. I will always be a DC Defenders fan. So I can't wait for that season to get kicked off with the XFL. I'm just a weird dude who enjoys stuff like that. But yeah, man, it's JL Skinner, says Billy. Yep, he's one of them. Christopher Smith from Georgia, Antonio Johnson from Texas A&M, my boy Jimmy Robinson from Florida State. There's some safeties out there. There's some dudes. So, all right, Dave, I think we've just about exhausted all options for this evening. And I don't know about you. I'm like Josh Allen in the fourth quarter of that game, man. I'm shot. I need some rest. And I need some rehab. For now, we will be back every Monday at 9 p.m. We might go back to Monday, Thursdays. We might switch to only Thursdays. We will keep you informed as we make sort of those big picture decisions, but know that it doesn't stop here for us here at the Air Raid Hour. We have the Senior Bowl. We have the Combine. We have free agency. We have the draft. We have OTAs. There are a ton of different things that we will be talking about all off season long. We'll be reacting every week to whatever news comes out, whether it's coaching staff changes or Brandon Beane's press conference and this kind of press conference and all of these different things. So it's going to be a fun off season. Can I say this too? I know I'm rambling on here. I don't know. This is maybe the drought era part of me. I'm weird. I like the off season. I just get I get so nervous that I don't enjoy the football games because I'm so just nervous and scared that it's all going to fall apart like it did yesterday. I like the off season where I can sort of almost be like a little Madden-y and tinker the roster and envision in my head what a perfect team would look like and not have that stress ball and that knot in my gut as I'm doing it. So to me, it's less stressful, which makes it a little bit more enjoyable in a weird sense.
Yeah, I mean, look, when I used to buy the Madden games because I don't buy them anymore because they stink. I used to pretty much just do the off-season stuff and simulate my seasons. That's what I did. But yeah, I get where you're coming from. I mean, there's a little bit of drought era scar tissue there probably with that, but it's going to be a long off-season this off-season because it's not – the tone's going to be different this year than it was last year where it was Bills are going to be back. We're ready to make that that, next step. And I'm not saying they won't be right for 2023, but the tone is certainly going to be different this offseason than it was the last two.
I'm already on this train too, and I've seen a couple of people talking about it now, and I've been talking about this for months too. Buffalo Bills. It's Jason Suggs says here, we will get a top 20 player because college QBs will take up the first 4 to 5 picks. I hope and pray that Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, and Bryce Young all go in the top 10. There are 2 names, possibly even 3 names, that if they drop into the early 20s range, I need the Buffalo Bills to get aggressive and go after. Jordan Addison, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Maybe I haven't done enough to feel comfortable saying Quentin Johnson from TCU as well, because those bigger receivers always scare me. Go get another alpha receiver. There are plenty of other guys at the bottom half of the first round, like Josh Downs and I'm blanking on some of their names, Zay Flowers and other names that I like. Nathaniel Dell. I don't know why I am blanking on the guy from Tennessee's name, Jalen Hyatt. There we go. Plenty of other good ones, but man, if you can get your hands on Smith and Jigba or Addison, it would just be perfect safety blanket for Josh Allen. And I would really love it if the Buffalo Bills could pull the trigger there in the first round. Wade comes in and says Bills are going wide receiver. All right. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, Dave, any final thoughts before we head on out of here?
Man, it's been a good season, great full season, first full season with Cover One as far as covering season start to finish. So appreciate the Cover One guys, Eric, Aaron, and Greg, for letting us do our thing and having this voice here to talk Bills. Maybe wasn't the most positive conversation tonight, but we do try to keep it objective. It's okay to be critical of the team. It doesn't mean you're less of a fan. And I'll never understand the people that think, that gatekeep fandom. I'll just never understand that. So you guys all fan how you want to fan, cope with this loss how you want to cope with it. You'll get no judgments from me. And if you want to criticize the team, that's cool. If you want to be positive about the team, that's cool too. Do whatever you want. But it doesn't mean you're any more or less of a fan one way or the other. So we appreciate you all. Had like 200 watching tonight after a tough game. And I think we all needed each other's company tonight. Yeah. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. You know, there's no better words. No better words could be spoken. So we're going to leave it at that. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back next Monday night with our annual roster deconstruction show. We're going to go position by position, talk about who's a free agent, who's not a free agent, who could be a cap casualty. Sean McDermott talked about maybe moving Christian Benford around today. I think moving Ryan Bates from right guard to left guard could be something that the Buffalo Bills should consider. There's a whole bunch of things. We signed a whole bunch of guys to futures deals today. Whole bunch to talk about in terms of roster construction. We might have some coaching updates to see if there's any shakeups on the coaching staff by next week. So we're back next week, roster deconstruction, and then my favorite 2 shows of the year, the Senior Bowl shows. I love the Senior Bowl. I love what Jim Nagy's doing there in Mobile. And the East-West Shrine doesn't get enough love. And last season, the Bills were still playing right around that time. So it takes place in Vegas. One of these years, I'm going to get out there. There were some really good players in the East-West Shrine. I'm looking forward to diving in deep into the East-West Shrine Bowl rosters as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, don't forget the Going Deep pod and the the Cover One Film Room tomorrow night, right here on the Cover One Sports Network. Until next time, go Bills.
Bills.